Okay, I think we've got quite a few people in, which is great. So, in the interest of time, because we've got a lot to cover in a short space of time here, so I'm just gonna get started. Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Really means a lot that you're coming and joining us on your lunch break, or maybe even watching this as a recording after, to help learn some things around how to successfully run your next project within the visitor attraction industry. Um, so, just to set the scene, what we're going to be talking about today is all about how to set up for success with software. Um, we know many software projects make a great start at what they're trying to do, and many of them get off track. And I wanted to start with a bit of an eye-opening statistic, first of all, which is that according to many studies, and including a very big one that happened a year ago, 66% of software projects are either delivered late, over budget, or fail to deliver on their goals completely. Um, and what's more staggering is that 23% of those as well fail altogether, which is horrific. And I think in many cases goes to speak to the state of the industry that we've all seen and experienced. We hear about software projects going wrong all the time, notoriously being expensive, dragging our heels on projects, all these different things that can come up. And if you've been involved in any software project in the past, I'm sure you will have experienced a little bit of the pain that comes along with this as well. It's not fun for anyone who's involved. And this is especially important for our industry, being the visitor attraction sector at the moment. So as we know in the visitor attraction sector, there are lots of rising costs. There's a need to automate. Um, the Visit England 2023 survey, as many of you will know, showed a growth in the industry beyond COVID, which was great, but definitely a slowing growth than we'd hoped would happen. And of course, this coupled with challenges with the cost of living for visitors, the challenges with staffing that we see across all the industry, all of the attractions that we work with, and a need to get visitor engagement off to a great start all the time. It's more important than ever to make sure that all projects, but especially those that are using technology to help automate and get more out of what we can deliver to our guests, are getting things right. Firstly, a little bit of an introduction from me. So, my name is Scott Gulliver. I run a company called Fluff Software based out of Swindon in England, and we are a specialist software consultancy. We work with visitor attractions to help them get impactful technology solutions off the ground. And we do that through combining our design, development, and strategy all throughout to help make sure that we get the best results for our clients. So that stat that we shared at the start around software projects failing, where does this come from? It's been something that we've been looking into for a very long time, and is a really key part of why we created this company in the first place. We see projects and have been on the receiving end of consultancies with not so good impact for a long time now. We wanted to create a place where we could really start to hone on this issue and really help to get success for every project that we work on. And so part of that today is to share with you what we've learned, and hopefully you can apply that to your own projects going forward. Um, in a few words, it's proper planning. And so what we're going to do today is explore the tools that we apply, in the hope that you can apply them just as well to your own projects. Um, there are two main causes we find of proper planning not being done, or being done to an extent but not fully thought through. Um, One is this ever pursuit of the agile framework. So agile is a great way to develop software, about small incremental releases, testing early and often. What we find is that that is a real driver for people to dive into the project without really stepping back first. It's an excuse to kind of get going. And there's nothing like just going into the real world and getting learning. But with that rabbit hole that you can very quickly go down without stepping back first, is a huge part of the issue here. And then the other part, which is what we often see, is that the business will create a brief, or the analyst will create a brief, hand that over to a technical team to deliver, and it's very much a one-way street at that point to deliver what's there. Both of these cause lots of wasted time, lots of wasted money, lots of confusion, and ultimately delivery of the wrong thing, which can be hugely challenging. So this is a typical type of approach for a software project that we see. We get a problem brief in at the start, and then some research is done, typically by non-technical people. which is fantastic and a great place to start from, really addressing the problem that needs to be thought through. They end up proposing a solution. It then gets given to a design and development team to then start building the thing that needs to be created. Now, the widening of from the top and bottom here are very much around the exploration. As you can see here, what happens is that after the research phase, people think they've got the right idea. We've narrowed it down to a very specific thing. And then all of the exploration gets done during design and development. You start going down a path, realizing that it's the wrong path. You then start learning about a different approach, hearing about a competitor halfway through. All of these things that delay the inevitable development time. And it's very much akin to if you were to start building a house, you wouldn't want to start development until you had a pretty good plan in place. You may find out the plug sockets are in the wrong place. You might find out that you want to add to it later and start small, but you need a good plan to start with. You need to know where you're heading, at least in the idea of it, first of all. So the approach that we like to ensure that all projects go through and really starts to stem success from is this idea of a triple diamond approach. Um, So it's expanding out the opportunity to explore, research, and define before we get into the development phase. As you'll know, as you'll be able to see throughout this whole webinar, there's nothing technical in the steps that we can take to make sure that the software projects are set up for success. It's very much the opposite. It's very much a people and processes type of solution that we can apply, and we've seen very happily applied to lots of varied projects and bring great success. So this triple diamond is all about finding opportunities at the start to go from the problem brief. So what is the problem that we're addressing? Into some deep research and get insight from that research around the opportunities that are out there without really having to specify what we're building at this point. From that, we can start exploring lots of ideas again. So we're widening out this space that we can explore and coming back to prototyping, among other tools, to help refine which idea we're going to go and select and ultimately build. And what we get at that middle point beyond that discovery phase of those first two diamonds is a really great plan. We've got everything in one place, ready to go. We know what we're building. Again, it may change. We're huge advocates of agile ourselves, with this idea that we can't hold on to a plan for too long. It needs to be out there in the real world and getting tested. But we want to be able to quickly design and develop based on a solid plan that's been well thought through with everyone involved. Another problem that we like to address here is that the problem you have with not having everyone being able to input into that initial discovery work is you get the same thinking, which ultimately to the same problems through the same solutions being proposed all the time. And what you get by weaving in designers, developers, solution architects, everyone that might eventually be involved in the building up in that early upfront stage, along with external consultants as well, is a lot more ideas being thrown in, a lot more opportunity to explore the art of the possible by refining your problem to start with. So this is our five-step process that we would recommend any company to make sure they go through each step specifically before they get to development. What we find is that there's a lot of work done around like we said, the definition of what needs to be done, and that gets handed over to development. But what we always make sure that we see on successful projects is that they've gone through these specific gates along the way. The other approach the other thing to bear in mind here is that with this approach, it's important to bring people along. So like I mentioned, it's very much a people and process thing. It's not just a process thing. It's about bringing everyone along for the ride, and actually each of these steps gives specifically lots of the ability for people to input their ideas throughout. Excuse me. Okay. So let's go into detail of these steps. And what I want to do here is to give you really specific takeaways. I'm conscious of your time today. So we're going to go through each of the steps. And I'm going to give you a few ideas of the toolkit that you can use to apply these steps along the way. Some really actionable, specific tools that you can apply with your next project. The recording will be available beyond this as well, so don't feel the need to write all these down. I'm going to throw a load of information at you quite quickly now, but the great thing about this process is that the steps are quite well defined, or they're very well defined, but the how you go about it and the tools you wish to implement are very much down to what works best for you. So this is what we've seen work quite a lot. So the defining step, a hugely important step, we call it the step back. So typically when we speak to companies, they've already got an idea in their head of what they want to build. They might need a new app to engage customers at the theme park. They might need a new website to help people get better directions before they go. The great thing is that all of these have ultimately stemmed from a problem they're trying to solve, and they've got an idea in their head about a direction they might want to go. We think internally and externally, it's really important to take a step back now and to really get everyone else involved in looking at what the problem is originally and thinking about, is this the right solution path we're going down? So there are lots of ways to do this. We'll go through a couple of the specific ones in a second, but the main tools that we use are something called a discovery canvas, which is all about a structured way of having a workshop with everyone that needs to be involved, working through each of the steps to get some wider context of the project and the problem space. Success measures are also really important in this phase. It's really important that key stakeholders, so people signing off budget, maybe key people in the industry, maybe even external board members. It's really important that you know what success looks like for this project, even if it's going to change over time. I think it's a really important part to start with of what are we actually trying to solve from a business point of view, rather than just the wider solution that we've got in mind. And this is especially important for visitor attraction. So when we're thinking about visitor attraction solutions, we're often thinking about the visitors, which is fantastic. But ultimately, it all needs to be tied back to the investment and the reason why we're making this change and what impact it's going to make to our bottom line, first and foremost. Assumption mapping is another really important one that we'll get into in a second, but it's a really important part of the process to make sure that you get everyone in the room and get all of the fears and the worries and the things that might go wrong and the things that are important out of their head and into one place that we can start exploring beyond that. And what we also do at this stage, because we find that lots of people very early on have an idea in their head of something, because they've not been widely shared, they will all be very different. So we also find that this is a great opportunity to get people to physically draw what's in their head. What are they imagining that this thing looks like? What do they envision that could be the solution here? And that could be in the form of a storyboard. It could be in the form of a rough sketch of the app or the solution that they use. Again, there's a very broad need here to know that they won't necessarily be the right solutions, but just having those initial thoughts in people's heads is a really great way to capture some ideas. So two specific tools we use in this phase, like I said, is one is the Discovery Canvas. This is the format we use with all of our projects, and it's been a really great way to step back, and I think it will apply really nicely to your projects internally going forward as well. So the top left is all about the background, but really about this problem exists within a wider context, right? So we need to understand, where's the history been? Where's this problem come from in the first place? What are the pain points that's driving this, for either the visitors, for either the business, or somewhere in between? Um, why it's now important? This is a really interesting question that drives some interesting discovery around which path should we go down. Like, is this actually the most important thing right now? Are there other things we could be addressing? Also, why is this important in the wider scheme of things for our visitors? And then the wider landscape looks a bit further than just our company. So beyond our attraction, what else are we seeing in the industry? Why is it important for us to do this now? Where's this problem coming from? Um, the purpose is all in the top right. So we look at things like measuring success. Why might it fail? A really important question to ask early on. Um, what does the wild success vision look like on the other side of that? If this went swimmingly and amazingly, what would we see? How do we actually measure it, and what is the mission statement? It's really important things to capture down and make sure that everyone's agreed on at a really early stage. Um, and then the bottom is all around the project itself. So what are we capturing in terms of the scope? What are we seeing in terms of either features or problems that need to be addressed? Again, these may change, but it's a really great way to capture those early on. And then finally, we look at things like the project itself. So what are some key dates? Are there key dates that everyone needs to be aware of? Do we need to hit this internally for a budgetary reason? Do we need to hit it externally to make sure that we can launch this at the right point, or get in front of another thing that's going on in the wider scheme of things? And finally, roles helps us just to capture and be sure that everyone is included in the future stages that isn't necessarily in that initial meeting. Beyond that, assumption mapping, I mentioned this already, but it's a really great exercise to do. So quite simply, on a whiteboard, virtual or in person, you create two axes: importance and known or unknown. And everyone writes down any thoughts in their head around what assumptions they've got. Assumptions around things that might go wrong, might go right, they think they know that wouldn't be important. And you start to, as a group, put the post-it notes on this scale of how important they are to the success of the project, and how known or unknown you think that assumption is. Is it mostly fact, or is it something that we're just guessing at this point? And actually, what you end up with is in the top right hand side a bucket of important unknown things that are going to be really important to start exploring from very early on. Now, step two is research. So beyond that, we now know what we want to do, and we explored the wider context. We now need to research into potential starting points, and this research should go as far and wide as you can. The more time spent here, the better solution you'll get. This is really about digging into the detail with the right people across all the fronts that make sense. Um, some great tools here are things like personas. So these are a great way to speak to people, capture key information about a demographic, and have that ready to share with your wider audience and the internal stakeholders. Interviews with visitors that are at the parks already or at the attraction already is a great way to get pain points to understand whether the pain points you're addressing are the right ones. This is a great way, by the way, to validate those assumptions that you've noted in that top right hand column or corner, sorry, of the assumptions chart. Real world data analytics, thankfully, attractions have got much better now at tracking data across all levels, and using this to dive into, are we solving the right problem in the right way, is really great. And also comparative tests, look at what's already out there, look at what people are using to solve the problem already. What else are other attractions doing? Really start to draw comparisons. Where are the gaps? Where can you do things differently? Step three is all about capturing that great work. So you'll gain a load of insight from the research, and it's an often missed step to make sure that you're capturing this in the right way and ultimately sparking the right context and the right idea through that. Some simple tools here. There's nothing special in this step, but very much about getting your team back together again, getting everyone back to really talk about what's been learned. There doesn't need to be huge opinions in this session, but actually can just be a factual readback of what's been found out. Um, User stories are another great way that we work in the technical world, but these are a great thing to capture at this early point. So looking at this point, we know what problem we're addressing and what's in the wider scheme of things. We don't necessarily know exactly what we're going to build to solve that, but you can start to address things like, as a visitor, I want to be able to find my way around the park easier so that I can get the most out of my day. Those problem statements are really great things that you can start putting against potential solutions, and ultimately having living documents. So a wiki, a Google Doc, a Word document, something that you can all share that has written down statements of fact that you've learned along the way. It's a fantastic way to start iterating on ideas beyond that. And of course, that brings us to step four. So we now have the why. We have the reason that we're doing what we're doing. We have the problem that we're addressing. We now need to describe what we're actually going to build as a solution to this. Now, quite a lot of the time, this may come back to the original idea that someone had. It might be that actually the app is the great solution to this problem. But it's fantastic to have validated that, and actually along the way, you'll learn about lots of features that need to be added, the first thing to start with, and all of that good stuff. Um, Create lots of ideas here. Nothing is a bad one. And ultimately, there are lots of tools to help generate that. Again, lots of ideas that you probably already implement in your day to day, but using whiteboards and collaboration tools. Storyboards are another great way to get back away from specific ideas, but actually about how does someone interact with their day in the attraction to begin with. Where are we going to drop this new solution in? What about if it's behind the scenes? If it's something that administrators are going to be using to make their lives easier, then how does it interact with their day? Um, and environment's a really good one here. So especially with attractions, we get the benefit of getting to break teams out from their desks and actually have them in the environment that they're going to be solving the problem for. It's a great way to spark some new ideas, get people's minds flowing, get them in the attraction, and sat down around a table and drawing out some ideas. And finally, we now have the ideas, and we've got hopefully some decisions made. Now, the key step in the idea phase as well is to quickly come to decisions. So you need to be able to get everyone together and have ultimately a decision maker that's going to be able to call the shots on what the right solution is. Beyond that, we can now start planning for what that is. Prototyping is another good way to narrow down designs and really start bringing to life this idea that everyone's created together. Um, that and the design direction together also help to visualize something that we can start to really plan. Without that step, it's kind of hard because we all again have different ideas in our heads of what's being built. Um, Once we've got an idea of what it is we're building and we can see that and play around with it and test it with users, we can then start thinking about the architecture, how it actually needs to be put together, both in the short term and the longer term, and importantly, what the roadmap is. So again, this is not the missed thing in today's agile world, but the premise of agile isn't necessarily not to have a roadmap. It's about to have a roadmap that can evolve. And I think it's always really important, especially when you're getting budget signed off for wider projects, is definitely start small, but have an idea of the end goal in mind that will of course change, but it just allows you to make sure things are set up in the right way. Start with the most important thing and move quickly from there. And so coming back to our triple diamond approach, hopefully you can see that those tools really help to get into the heart of those first two phases, or the first two diamonds, sorry. So we've got good research, we've got great insight that we found out that drives that early analysis. We then get lots of ideas going through to prototyping to narrow those down. And ultimately, by the time we hit that important development phase, we've got such a solid idea of what we're doing that the plan should be so specific that it's hard to go off course at that point. This is ultimately what helps you to stay on track during development. It's about proper planning in the right way with those tools. And when it works well, we get delighted visitors, we get the right solutions, we get delighted stakeholders because everything's on time and on budget. There are, of course, other tools you can use to make sure that the actual plan stays on track, but that plan to begin with is the most important thing. Setting those foundations up for success is the most important thing. And in terms of how you can get started with this, there's nothing scary about these tools, right? They're tools that we all use every day, and so it's important to start small. I think starting small and implementing just a couple of these things ahead of your next project will beat not doing it at all because you don't want to be you want to get 100% right from the start. In fact, any of these small changes done in that order will help to set the context up for success from the start. It's also important to have the right people in the room. I've talked a lot about bringing everyone in. Equally, it's still important to have people who can make decisions quickly. We find that that's where a lot of these projects stall, is that as people start to explore lots of things and they go down rabbit holes very quickly and things kind of stall because there's loads of stuff being discussed at once, which is fantastic, but it does need to come back in as per that triple diamond approach. It's great to explore as wide as we can, but we need to come back in. And so having people who can just make quick decisions and be a little bit separate from that ideation phase is a really key part of making sure that we keep momentum moving towards that important build phase. We definitely shouldn't be back in the world of spending months and months on creating the plan, just to find out it's not the right one. So definitely keep momentum building in that. And so I want to summarize this with a great, quite famous quote by the famous Benjamin Franklin, which is, "By failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail." And ultimately, this is the challenge that we address with every solution that we work on, and really help our clients to address. And we really hope that this approach and this thinking can help you in all of your future software projects. We really find that it is a huge part of avoiding being one of those 66% of people or 60% of projects rather, that have problems along the way. Very conscious of your time. I want to thank you ever so much for spending the time with me today. If it sounds interesting, we guide companies through this process all the time. I'm always delighted to have a chat. I'm available on LinkedIn, and well, everywhere you would imagine to find someone, I'm available. Um, I would say as well is that if you've spent the time with us today, I want to thank you personally by saying that if you have a project coming up in the next 3 to 6 months, I'll be delighted to sit down half an hour without any strings attached and just talk to you about how you can specifically apply some of these tools with your team. We get into lots of early discussions around this stuff with people, and find it's really valuable to help them identify exactly how they can approach this to their next project. So please do get in touch if you've got a project. I love talking tech, and it'd be great to understand what you're doing and see if we can't help you with some ideas along the way. I'm going to dive over to some questions now, from the chat. So let's have a look at what we've got in the chat quickly. So do you also have to research the competitors? It's always great. I think the challenge we find with some companies is they operate in a bit of an echo chamber sometimes. Um, the great thing is about our industry is that actually we find that lots of attractions do end up speaking to lots of other attractions. It's a really great thing there, and they swap ideas and tips. And actually, there are lots of viable solutions that work across the board. We tend to work on much more bespoke solutions, but that's not to say there aren't great solutions out there that exist already. And we often end up coming to the end of a discovery phase, finding that there are great ready-made solutions to put in place. Um, So yeah, I think competitor research is always helpful. I think it's useful to explore what we do. And as I say, it doesn't have to be behind the scenes competitor research. It can very much be talking to your peers and networking with them and finding what works. Um, it can quite be hard. Can sometimes be hard just by researching online to find out what's gone wrong. People aren't usually willing to share that so readily. Um, but it's definitely you'll definitely get that from speaking to people in the industry, and there are lots of great membership organisations that we're part of that help to get that conversation out there. Um, what are some of the most common mistakes you see companies make when they jump straight into development without proper planning? Yeah, so inevitably it is the discovery that's done during it. So all of this work to identify where the problems might be, if it's the right solution, all of these things end up getting done after something's already been built. And we have this back and forth with we see companies having this back and forth with we built this now, but actually it's been the wrong approach. We need to turn that around and rebuild this. Um, I keep talking about agile, and again, I'm a huge proponent of agile, but it can get used in the wrong way sometimes, and we create a lot of throwaway code, and there are a lot of lower budget ways to do that, such as this research, where you can just get the team together for a short period of time, first of all, to make sure that doesn't happen. Um, Building the wrong thing is another thing. I think we see as a consultancy and people coming to us, we see so many people coming to us with a solution in mind, and often it's the right one. Occasionally, it's not, and this is why we're so insistent on this work, and why we think all companies should be doing this much more readily with what they've got. It can be so easy to go down the path of building something that's not going to have the right impact, or even building something that's hugely unnecessary and expensive when there's a much quicker win to the problem that you've got in mind. It's always essential to kind of take that step back and make sure you are building the right thing. Make sure you've got that certainty, and don't set the whole team up that's going to be building it for yeah, some pain from the beginning. It's always a good thing to do. Um, and the last question here, so what do you say to businesses that feel like they don't have enough time to spend on planning because they're eager to launch quickly? Again, another really common problem we see all the time. I was speaking to a company this morning who needs something launched within the next 8 weeks, and it doesn't give a lot of time, right, for actually that step back. Um, it's What I would say is that we find that this always saves time and money, and ultimately, the timeline question is a really important part of discovery. The two questions that are always brought up in as part of discovery, along with what we're solving, are how much do we need to spend on this and how much time should we spend, and they should really always be driven, as should any decision, from the business point of view. So what makes sense to invest, and if you don't know that, then we can start working that out. You can start looking at what impact is this going to make to the bottom line, start doing some research there, maybe around similar projects in the past. And the timeline is also a huge important aspect. And actually, by doing thorough planning ahead of time, you might find that actually there's a really small piece you can start with that's going to launch with huge impact within a quick space of time without much risk. Because of course, risk is another thing that we want to reduce during this, and make sure that that initial deadline is met with great success from the outset. So yeah, I'm a huge advocate for not just rushing into things, and ultimately, even a day or two of just kind of stepping back and running through the basics, run through the checklist to make sure everything's done. Um, Oh, one more question I've got. I'll try and answer this in 30 seconds. So, is it possible for you to pick up a project that we have embarked on but hesitant to continue working on due to some of the obstacles you've mentioned, failure to completely comprehend the goal of the project, or lost in translation? Yeah, I mean, I would hope that any company would be able to do that. We, of course, do that all the time. So, it's again, like, this step back is really helpful. That wider context in that discovery canvas that we ran through halfway through, that's a really great time to look at, what's been the historic context of this project specifically. What about the wider scheme of things? Where have things fallen down? And actually, sometimes just taking a step back from things that are ongoing, and the kind of BAU approach can give you that insight that you need to make sure that it's going to be set up for success. And yeah, maybe it's just a small tweak, a few tweaks you need. Maybe it's a new team you need on it. Maybe it's just a new lease of life or a slightly different approach to it. Loads of ways to tackle software projects to make them successful beyond just re-architecting the software. A lot of the time, it is down to people, processes, and all of that stuff, as we've been talking about today. And I'm staring at my clock with 20 seconds to go, so I'm going to wrap up on time. Thank you all so much for your questions. Like I say, be delighted to talk to any of you at any time. It's an industry we are hugely a part of, and love to be a part of. It's it's an industry very close to our heart, and we would love to help any of you with some ideas and share some knowledge. Thank you ever so much again, and I hope you have a great day.